Music. It makes you feel something that you can't always explain. Music has been an integral part of human history, dating back thousands of years, from rhythms and melodies of ancient civilizations to the haunting chants of an army before battle. Join me today on Ancient Yoke as we take a journey back in time to explore the fascinating world of ancient music. We'll uncover the instruments, styles, and traditions of some of the world's oldest musical cultures and learn how music has evolved over the centuries to become the diverse and vibrant art form that we know today. So sit back, relax, and let the sounds of the past transport you to another world. Finding evidence for music is hard, as music isn't a physical object and doesn't always leave behind physical evidence. The oldest physical evidence comes in the form of a 50,000-year-old Neanderthal bone flute. The flute was carved out of a cave bear bone and was discovered at the Adritska River in 1995. In 2015, musicologist Bob Fink explained that the flute had 4 finger holes with 4 different pitches. These pitches match 4 notes of the traditional scale we use in music today. This shows that other species of humans could express themselves through music just like we do today, and we can only imagine what beautiful songs they played while resting under the stars. I personally think that handcrafting these bone flutes was an ancient knowledge passed down through the generations, with a spiritual belief being the main driving force. We know that Neanderthals buried their dead, as mentioned in a few of my other videos, so is it so unrealistic to suggest that they could have played these flutes at the burials? We all know that music brings us together and helps us create bonds, so I think this could have drove Neanderthals to create these beautiful flutes. Similar to objects that are common in later hunter-gatherer societies, such as rattles, shakers, and drums, the absence of other instruments from and before this time may be due to their use of weaker and thus more biodegradable materials, such as reeds, gourds, skins, and bark. A painting in the cave of Tuatha, dating to 15,000 BC, is thought to depict a shaman playing a musical bow. Other ways of making music may have been used long before the invention of bone flutes. Singing, clapping hands, sticks, or stones together may have been used. Of course, there is no archaeological evidence to show this, but it's unlikely that music started with just the flute. Humming, singing, and clapping hands to a beat could have been a possibility at human camps. Evidence for human camps are at least 200,000 years old, and playing music or singing in harmony together, and maybe even dancing around the warmth of the fire, could have played a big role in bringing tribes closer together and winding the tightly knit bonds we humans create with each other. One thing that is for definite is that we have been fascinated with music and sound for thousands of years. When we go back to some of the oldest civilizations, we find that lots of their architecture is built to amplify and carry sound. The Red Pyramid of Egypt is the 3rd biggest Egyptian pyramid, located at the Dashur necropolis in Cairo. The Red Pyramid is fascinating because it, like the Great Pyramid, has acoustic features. Sound is amplified and carried throughout the pyramid. It's unknown what the Egyptians used the acoustic features for. There is one theory called the air shaft theory, which suggests that Egyptian workers in the king's chamber would receive orders shouted from an air shaft which would be carried by the acoustic features down into the king's chamber. The workers would then shout the orders back up a separate air shaft to the workers on top of the pyramid as they laid extremely heavy limestone blocks down. I'm missing out a pile of information here, so if you'd like to know more about the evidence that backs this theory, then please see the video I've linked here. This theory explains the purpose of the air shafts in the Great Pyramid and the acoustic features in the king's and queen's chamber. Music formed an important part of Egyptian life, and musicians occupied a variety of positions in Egyptian society. Music found its way into many contexts in Egypt: temples, palaces, workshops, farms, battlefields, and the tomb. Music was an integral part of religious worship in ancient Egypt, so it is not surprising that there were gods specifically associated with music, such as Hathor and Bes. Both were also associated with dance, fertility, and childbirth. All the major categories of musical instruments, percussion, wind, and string, were represented in Pharaonic Egypt. Percussion instruments included handheld drums, rattles, bells, and the sistrum, a highly important rattle used in religious worship. Wind instruments included flutes and trumpets. String instruments included harps, lyres, and lutes. Instruments were frequently inscribed with the name of the owner and decorated with the representation of the goddess Hathor or the god Bes. Both male and female voices were also frequently used in ancient Egyptian music. Professional musicians existed on a number of social levels in ancient Egypt. Perhaps the highest status belonged to temple musicians who played music to a particular god or goddess. Musicians connected with the royal household were held in high esteem, as were certain gifted singers and harp players. Somewhat lower on the social scale were musicians who acted as entertainers for parties and festivals, frequently accompanied by dancers. There is little evidence for amateur musicians in Pharaonic Egypt, and it is unlikely that musical achievement was seen as a desirable goal for individuals who were not professionals. The ancient Egyptians did not notate their music before the Greco-Roman period, so attempts to reconstruct Pharaonic music remain speculative. Representational evidence can give a general idea of the sound of ancient Egyptian music. Ritual temple music consisted of the sistrum, accompanied by a beautiful voice, sometimes with a harp and/or percussion instruments like drums. Music has been an integral part of warfare and soldiers' lives since the dawn of history. Both the Greek and Roman armies used brass and percussion instruments, including the ancestors of modern cornet and tubas, to convey information on the march. There was no shortage in the practice of music among the Roman enemies. The Celts, who for centuries charged into battle accompanied by their own array of horns, drums, and bagpipes. Bagpipes was so integral to the Scottish martial repertoire that British outlawed the instrument after the defeat of Prince Charles Edward Stuart's Scottish army in 1746, only to lift the ban for the benefit of its own Scottish regiment soon thereafter. In The Art of War by Niccolo Machiavelli, it says that commanding officers should issue orders by means of the trumpet because its piercing tone and great volume could be heard above the intense sound of combat. He also said, cavalry trumpets ought to have a distinctively different sound, so their calls would not be mistaken for those related to the infantry. Drums and flutes were useful to discipline on the march and during infantry maneuvers on the battlefield itself. Every nation eventually adopted its own signature march, which later turned into the modern national anthem, and its troops were required to memorize it as well. Amid the smoke of battle, a column of troops on the move, half a mile away, might be friendly or hostile, but even if their battle standard was obscured, they might be identified by their march music. War dances are another example of music before battle. War dances were used by tribes to both intimidate the enemy and to inspire tribesmen before battle. One famous war dance is the haka, which is performed at special Maori events as part of tradition. You may also have seen the haka performed by the All Blacks rugby team. The Zulu also have a famous war dance that is represented in the 1964 Zulu film. Although the dance isn't entirely accurate, and I can't seem to find any account of British soldiers ever witnessing the dance before battle. There are a few theories on how music and song may have evolved into use. There is little evidence to support these theories, so please remember that these are simply guesses based on observations in both other animals and ourselves. The first theory is that music arose as an elaborate form of sexual selection, perhaps in mating calls, just like songs in some bird species. This theory is generally credited to Charles Darwin. It first appeared in Darwin's 1871 book, The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex, and has since been criticised as there is no evidence that either human sex is more musical. The second theory is that music arose alongside language, both of which supposedly descend from a shared precursor. The biologist Herbert Spencer was an important early supporter of this theory, as was the composer Richard Wagner, who termed the music and language's shared ancestor as speech music. Since the 21st century, a number of scholars have supported this theory, particularly the archaeologist Stephen Mithun. Another theory is that music had a practical purpose among early communities. Things music could have been used for are to assist in organising cohesive labour, to improve ease and range of long-distance communication, to enhance communication with the divine or otherwise supernatural, to assist in coordination, cohesion and cooperation, particularly in the context of families and communities, and to be a means of frightening off predators or herding herds of prey. Many cultures have their own mythical origins of the creation of music. Specific figures are sometimes credited with inventing music, such as Jabal in Christian mythology, the legendary Sahar Jamshid in Persian Iranian mythology, the goddess Saraswati in Hinduism, and the Muses in ancient Greek mythology. So in conclusion, we don't know exactly where, when, or how music originated. I hope this video shows people some of the first musical traditions and instruments. There's that much information on this topic that I couldn't squeeze it all into one video, so I encourage you to use the sources below and dive deeper into researching it yourselves. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed and wish to see more, then please like and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions for future videos, then leave them in the comments below. Have a good one.